So I want to just do a quick note about Mortimer J. Adler. Okay, so Mortimer J. Adler, he's a disgusting, putrid, he's just a low life piece of shit. Here's a picture right here. But you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, right? Even though he looks like he's got the face of a old right wing Republican curmudgeon, judgmental racist, white supremacist piece of shit kind of face. That's actually that that holds true. Okay, that book, you can judge this book by its cover. Okay, so Mortimer J. Adler, and that's how the yuppies, these middle class stuck up yuppie fucking snobs, these fake fucking progressives, they put this Mortimer Adler up on a pedestal like he's like he's a goddamn Shakespeare. He's not a fucking Shakespeare. He's a fake. If you ever been to college and you had that professor that thought that they knew every goddamn thing, and you had to shut up and sit down and listen to their bullshit, but you knew that they were fucking dumb as shit, this is him. This is exactly why all these professors act like this, because of him. Now, Mortimer J. Adler, he was let's see, a little bit of background. I think he's a professor of some kind. In 1952, he came up with the great books. That's the classics. So he was the one that picked the canon. He got to pick the Bible, right, of liberal Western, theology, or whatever you want to call it, nationalism. And so he picked the classics, right? He got to make sure he got the pedophiles of Plato and Socrates and Aristotle. In fact, he considers himself an Aristotelian. He's like, hey, Mortimer J. Adler, what kind of person you are? Oh, I'm an Aristotelian. And Columbus. There's a lot of guys, actually. That's okay. So it's hard for me to even respect the classics. I like math. Math kind of builds on itself. You learn 1 + 1 = 2, and then there's multiplications when you have groups, and so there's a logical progression to it. And I'm not for sure if you actually need to know the Roman or Greek or Muslim person who actually came up with it, but ultimately, that's the idea that matters. It's the idea that matters, right? As long as we're advancing, and that's what the whole idea is that the Western thought is all the greatest thoughts that's ever been thunk up ever in your life. I want to think of like some good love quotes by rappers, but I think I might have to come back to it. So you just got to focus on the solution, and the solution is love. And you don't have to be a scholar. You don't have to have all these damn degrees to be able to understand how to live life. Anybody is able to understand beauty and truth. These are basic, understandings. In fact, the more that you learn, the more that you could deceive others instead of actually being honest and genuine. There's one rapper, he said, like sweet morning dew, I took one look at you and it was plain to see you're my destiny. Drake says, no strings attached. Your love is so Wi-Fi. Lil Wayne, but anyway, I think you're bionic, and I don't think you're beautiful. I think you're way beyond it. So, you're bionic. You're beyond it. And then I've quoted actually Eminem Rihanna's song, Love the Way You Lie, where he's sitting there saying, maybe that's what happens when a tornado meets a volcano. All I know is I love you too much to walk away. Now come inside. Pick up your bags off the sidewalk. Don't you hear sincerity in my voice when I talk? I told you this is my fault. Look me in the eyeball. Next time I'm pissed, I'll aim my fist at the drywall. Yeah, like when a tornado meets a volcano. When a tornado meets a volcano. So these are, I don't think Mortimer fucking Adler would be able to say half the profound shit that I just now said. I quoted Lil Wayne. Lil Wayne was more charismatic, more sophisticated than Mortimer J. Adler. Suck my dick, Mortimer J. Adler, fucking dick lovers. Y'all kiss my ass. But here, there's Jane Austen. Jane Austen. So Mortimer J. Adler, he is a fucking white supremacist piece of shit, and I'll get to that in a second. But he didn't even think Jane Austen was worthy of, putting into the canon. Give a loose rein to your fancy, indulge your imagination in every possible flight. That's from Pride and Prejudice. So if you only listen to, Mortimer J. Adler, you would never come across this. You would never come across George Carlin. When is Jesus going to bring the pork chops? When's he going to bring the pork chops? Bernie Sanders, our revolution. I bet you, actually, Mortimer J. Adler is the exact ideological opposite of Mortimer J. Adler. And Jerome, his middle name is Jerome. Well, how's he gonna? He's gonna exclude every black author. He doesn't think that there's been one single black author in the history of the world that was good enough to be included into this great books, canon. And so he's the author of the Encyclopedia Britannica, and he was able to get this great books program, passed in the Encyclopedia Britannica. So that's some elite shit, right? That's at the top. That's like when Reuters, reports something, or the Associated Press reports something. It's just true just because they said it was. And so the Encyclopedia Britannica, right, they used to go around selling those back in the day. I don't know if you all know this or not, but they used to sell like 26 volumes of encyclopedias, and they were just supposed to be sort of like kind of like dictionaries, but they had like biographies and historical notes on each one. Anyways, so the fact that this is a titan of Western civilization, of the canon, Mortimer J. Adler had got to decide so much of what Americans were reading, what they weren't reading, what was considered a classic, what wasn't considered a classic, what was considered Western tradition, and what wasn't considered Western tradition. So, right, Bernie Sanders, it's not Western tradition. George Carlin, not Western tradition. Jane Austen, Invisible Man, Ralph Ellison. So this is just one of the black books authors. The Dance of Anger, right? This is written by a woman. So what could Harriet Goldher Lerner know, right? You need to learn all the ideas about love from Aristotle. You can't learn it from this Harriet Goldher Lerner. This Goldher Lerner, she doesn't know. She's not Aristotle, is she? She's not no Aristotle. Why would you want to learn anything she says? So, Mortimer J. Adler, he pisses me off for a lot of reasons. Anytime anybody shows him respect, it's like, how do you find respect out of a racist, out of a white supremacist? He's sitting there, he's Jerome, so that's cultural appropriation, right? But let's take a look at what he's actually said that he believes, okay? So, he's just sitting there talking about all the criticisms about the great books, and he's like, they're all ignorant, okay? This is a guy who pays attention to his words, and he's, he knows he's being recorded, okay? So he's like, they're all ignorant. They have no background. They've got no depth of knowledge, no memory. I would not be so impatient if they were relevant. But they're not irrelevant. They're just wasting my time, and I don't want to hear about any of these goddamn critics, right? He's pretty arrogant son of a bitch, right? Thinks that only the 100 books that he picked into the great books list is the only books that mattered. So let's go on. He says, all this business of quotas, so many blacks, so many whites, so many women, so many men. It's all not relevant. Okay? So this is just giving you a sense of the kind of person that he is. Oh, it's not relevant. They're criticisms. I'm a white male. I am part of the ivory tower. How dare you question a white man when he speaks? Don't you understand? When I go into the class and I scare the shit out of these students, they listen. Now you goddamn, you damned Americans, why can't you just be like dumb, obedient, quiet students? Shut the fuck up and listen to what I say. I'm the goddamn man. So, are you all about ready for the racism? It's pretty bad. Let's go straight to it, okay? Well, here's something else. Adler says being influential is not the mark of a great book. Because they were sitting there saying, well, what about, Uncle Tom's Cabin? Abraham Lincoln goes up to Harriet Beecher Stowe and says, so you're the little woman who caused this war. Because she wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin, showcasing the brutalities of slavery. It became wildly popular. And that happened right before the Civil War began. But apparently, according to Mortimer J. Adler, the book which caused 500,000 Americans to be murdered, the fight against slavery, the fight for capitalism, the fight for whatever, right? All that didn't matter. So there are good books by blacks, about 10, that are worth reading for one or two ideas. This is Mortimer J. Adler. Mortimer J. Adler. Yeah, sure, there are good books by blacks. Maybe 10. There's only 10 of them. Sure. There are good books by blacks. I'm sure there are good books by blacks. I'm sure. Maybe 10 books. that I could think of that black people have written that are worth reading for maybe one or two good ideas. But that's it. I'm not giving any more credit to black people than just 10 good books for one or two good thoughts in each one of those books. Who am I? Mortimer J. Adler. Mortimer Jerome Adler, but he made it J because he didn't want anybody to know that he had a black middle name. Because he's a racist piece of shit. He is such a white supremacist. Look at this. He makes a list of the great books ever, right? It's only the Europeans, right? It's only the white people. So out of 151 authors, 49 of them were English American authors. 27 of them were Frenchmen, 20 were Germans, 15 were ancient Greeks, 9 ancient Romans, 4 Scandinavians, 3 Spaniards, 3 Italians, 3 Irishmen, 3 Scots, and 3 Eastern Europeans. No black people, no brown people, barely a smattering of Eastern Europeans. So no yellow people, no brown people, no black people, not even Eastern Europeans. So there's whites that are being excluded too. So this is a very, very racist book. I mean, Mortimer Jerome Adler, this motherfucker's an Aristotelian. He is a blind follower of Aristotle. Whatever Aristotle said, whatever he did, he doesn't care. He just believes him. I love you, Aristotle, and I always will. So that's ethnically exclusive. The Henry Louis Gates took issue with it. He's a black Harvard professor. He was the one that got arrested by a police officer that Obama had called stupid. He said that the police officer acted stupidly. So this Henry Louis Gates was like, this is amazing. This is remarkable. This is the top echelon of Western universities, Western thought, the Encyclopedia Britannica, and they went ahead and elected this white supremacist to pick the canon of what books are to be read and what books are not to be read. And he says that there are no good books by blacks, maybe 10, and only 1 or 2 are good for reading. Well, there's Ralph Ellison, right? That was one. What about Martin Luther King? Martin Luther King has the letter, in jail of Birmingham, I Have a Dream speech. He's had so many incredible quotes. Frederick Douglass. What about Malcolm X, Huey Newton, Barack Obama? I mean, there's a ton of black people. I guess maybe he didn't know about Barack. But to sit there and say that no black people had contributed to the, thought of Western tradition, of course they did. Tupac, even when Tupac was talking about the blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice, and he's sitting there saying, these love songs that he's been writing, he writes these poetry and these love songs, that's, there's something heartfelt about that. And that's also another thing that Mortimer J. Adler gets wrong. A book is just a collection of ideas, right, from cover to cover. So how are you supposed to read a book? What, you're supposed to internalize it and eat it and devour it and do all that type of shit? I don't know. It almost seems like that's like some literary professor trying to keep their job, right? This is the way you're supposed to properly read a book. The way you're supposed to properly read a book is you open it and you enjoy it and you're entertained. That's how you're supposed to read a book. And ultimately, you don't just get all your ideas from books. You get your ideas from movies, you get your ideas from TV shows, and you get your ideas from songs. And so there's different ways that you can internalize. Do you need to learn pragmatism just by reading William James? Can't you watch, a movie that has a pragmatic decider, a decision that was pragmatic? I mean, you can learn these concepts from movies, TV shows, songs, and from each other. We could just dialogue. In fact, we learn much more through dialogue. So instead of venerating and worshiping, these authors, acting like they have a monopoly on what is beauty and what isn't beauty. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder, so it's completely subjective. How the fuck is Mortimer Adler going to sit there and try to tell me that there is an objective standard for beauty and only his objective standard is what we all need to be listened to? That sounds like an authoritarian fascist. That sounds like a white supremacist, authoritarian, right-wing fascist, low-life piece of shit. He's racist. He says that there are some good books by blacks, just 10, and only 1 or 2 good thoughts from each one of those. The Souls of Black Folks. There's a whole bunch of them, right? I go on and on. I'll mention some more later on. But he says, I think probably in the next century there will be some black that writes a great book, but there hasn't been one so far. Not yet. Sorry, black people, you haven't read a great book yet for, Mortimer J. Adler to put your black thoughts, your African thoughts into this, great book list. And fuck that guy, and fuck the people that actually look up to this fucking prick. To be honest, seriously, what kind of yuppie middle class piece of shit? It's like, well, yeah, he's a racist piece of shit, but you know, he did say something about beauty that I was like, that's interesting. Yeah, that's the reason why you're going to keep this white supremacist around, because and the fact that you're not even bothered by that, the fact that you're not even bothered that he sits there and says that there's no good black authors whatsoever. Not one single black has written a great book worthy of putting into the canon. And he says that 10 are good, but only because of one or two ideas. Not a great book, just a great thought, great idea, but not a great book. These are quoted. This is a verbatim quote. He knew he was being quoted. Didn't give a shit. Went ahead and says, you know, blacks didn't write great enough. They didn't live up to his criteria. He forgets all about Central America, Africa, Eastern Europeans. No black, brown, yellow authors out of all these greatest books. None of them. I think it's absolutely reprehensible. It's also telling that when there's such great racism that's permeating in the highest level of Western university scholarship, and nobody is pointing this shit out, and nobody's noticing, or people are just blindly going along with this shit, you're a fucking white supremacist. And I almost makes me think that the entire country is white supremacist. I saw Kentucky pick a corporate Democrat run against a teabagger Republican, and the Republican won. And then I saw the national election do it. So really, all of America is Kentucky. The whole country is Kentucky. Why? Because your Encyclopedia Britannica was being written by a white supremacist. Your great book program, the so-called classics, was, you know, picked by white supremacists. You're going to try to tell me that the souls of black folks, W.E.B. Du Bois, there's nothing that black folks have contributed whatsoever that can be, you know, that could be, and then that puts them on the defensive. Why do we put Marcel Proust, Swan in Love? You ever read Swan in Love? No, we got to have Swan in Love by Marcel Proust. What about Henry Fielding's Tom Jones? These are essential. For Mortimer J. Adler, he was like, no, Tom Jones is the most important goddamn book I've ever fucking read in my life. Make sure Tom Jones gets in there. But don't talk to me about no Gone with the Wind. Don't talk to me about the Grapes of Wrath. Don't talk to me about, you know, what's the book that started the Civil War, Uncle Tom's Cabin. Don't tell me about any of that, you know. Don't give it. I don't care about no Jane Austen, no Virginia Woolf. Get them women authors out of here. Mortimer J. Adler is a man, and only men can, you know, determine what's beauty and what's truth and what's just and what's right. So he didn't have any women. He didn't have any black, brown, yellow people. It was very, very racist, you know. And whereas not having quotas, you know, it's not so much you have a quota, but if you have no black people, you know, here's all the, I got 150 of the greatest books ever. Oh, where's the you know, Frederick Douglass's, right, Frederick Douglass is not Up From Slavery, but his autobiography. Where's the autobiography of Frederick Douglass? Where's the autobiography of Malcolm X? Where is the Up From Slavery by Booker T. Washington? No, none of these. Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. None of these. Nobody. What about that guy who invented all that peanuts? You know, George Washington Carver. The peanut butter and the peanut this and the peanut that. Nothing he wrote down was significant either. In fact, I would make the argument that scientific ideas are more important than everything that Mortimer J. Adler has ever fucking said in his entire goddamn life. I would rather read all of George Washington Carver's ideas about peanut butter and how he made peanuts into peanut butter than any of Mortimer, that creepy fucking weird ass pedophile worshipping piece of shit Mortimer J. Adler. I give a fuck less what the fuck he had to write or what his opinion was about any goddamn thing. He's gonna sit there and say every fucking black person. No, not a single fucking black book. A black person has wrote a book that was good enough for him. Franz Fanon, Langston Hughes, the poetry of Langston Hughes. All of Frederick Douglass' works are admitted. Let's see, Zora Neale Hurston gone, Anna Julia Cooper gone, Nelson Mandela, nothing by Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela didn't say anything worthy of repeating. This is the 80s, so, you know, Nelson Mandela was a terrorist to the United States. And Bin Laden was a freedom fighter. Martin Luther King, Booker T, Huey Newton. Egypt, the men responsible for the pyramids and the Sphinx. That's Africa. In fact, we're all Africans. Guess what, Mortimer J. Adler? We all came out of Africa. Sorry about your damn luck there, buddy. I bet that I bet that'll irk you. I'm sure that's what this shit reminds me of. The fact that he's trying to say that he's got this criteria and it's scientific, and so therefore he knows what's smart, what isn't smart. Back in the 1895, 1795, they started to say there used to be the pseudo-racist science, and they used to say that white people were genetically better or worse than black people. And so there were scientists, and they were sitting there doing all these studies, right? And then they would have these results, and people would come away believing it. In fact, Charles Darwin wrote his Origin of Species, or something about the preservation of favored races, as if like he was writing to the white people and talking about, hey, we need to preserve our race. And you would think racists would want to listen to that. That was right before the Civil War began, but apparently the racists were like, nah, we're going to kill people so we can keep on enslaving these black people. So I'd much rather read all the material by George Washington Carver than Mortimer fucking J. Adler, Jerome. Fuck you, Jerome. And Neil deGrasse Tyson, you know, and then talk about being significant to the contemporary world. Frederick Douglass's ideas fanned the flames of Civil War, emancipation. People got freedom because of Frederick Douglass' ideas. And then, you know, Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin. That is such a significant book to exclude that book. It's almost like he's jealous. It's like, okay, yeah. That book changed the world. I know. Just like Communist Manifesto, right? Karl Marx writes Communist Manifesto, and then boom, 50 revolutions all throughout the world. So that's a book that should be in the great books, right? If you wrote a book and it's short and it set, 50 different countries on fire with a revolutionary fervor, I think you might want to consider putting that into your, book of 100 greatest books. So I think I've crossed a lot of this. The Philadelphia Negro, James Baldwin, he wrote the Philadelphia Negro. The Suppression of the Atlantic Slave Trade, I think that's another W.E.B. Du Bois book. It was Richard Wright, Toni Morrison, Gwendolyn Brooks, Margaret Alexander's Jubilee. Beloved by Toni Morrison, Go Tell It on the Mountain. Oh, that's what James Baldwin, Go Tell It on the Mountain. I guess the Philadelphia Negro is W.E.B. Du Bois. So those are, more black books, black authors. I don't know if you understand this, Mortimer J. Adler and all those who kiss Mortimer J. Adler's ass, but black people's brains are just like white people's brains. They think in the same way. If you taught them English, they have those English sentences, just running through their brains. If you taught them German, then they have German sentences. It's stream of conscious that doesn't stop. They put on their pants one leg at a time, just like anybody else. They have a darker pigmentation of skin. But it turns out that we can have each other's babies, right? So there's we're all one baby. We're all related. So learn to love the other. You fucking racist pieces of shit. Okay. Martin Luther King says injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. That's remarkable. That's just like Che Guevara's quote when he says the great thing about being revolutionary is you can see injustice anywhere you go. Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. Here's some ideas that they have other people wanted to be put into the canon. And so, Death and the King's Horsemen by Wo Soyinka. This is Henry Louis Gates. Souls of Black Folks. Invisible Man. Zora Neale Hurston. Their Eyes Were Watching God. Beloved. Jane Tompkins. She says The Riders of the Purple Sage. Zane Grey. Star Wars. That's actually all current. Star Wars, you're trying to get young people involved in this, shit. So Star Wars is a good choice. Alice Miller, a Swiss psychologist for your own good. Margaret Mitchell, Gone with the Wind. E.T. by Steven Spielberg. So those are pretty good, right? Those are some movies. We get to, learn by watching movies. Ed Hirsch or E.D. Hirsch, The Bible, Shakespeare's Tragedies, I Have a Dream speech by Martin Luther King, Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. So, the other quotes that Mortimer J. Adler have, just to, he's a Roman Catholic too, so big shocker that he looks at all these oppressor molesters throughout history and thinks that they're awesome people. But Roman Catholic Mortimer Jerome Adler, he says that if there's no Latinos in this canon, it's because of Octavio Paz didn't recommend any. So I'm assuming Octavio Paz is some expert in Latino studies, and so therefore when he was like, hey, what do we learn about in Latino studies? And then he was like, I don't know. Mortimer Adler was like, well, I tried to get some Latinos in, but if there's no blacks, that's because they didn't write any good books. And then he says being influential is not the mark of a great book. Oh, really? What is the if only he read it, but he thought it was a great book, does it get in? I bet it does. So the whole world could love a book, but if Mortimer J. Adler says, fuck that book, then we're supposed to go along with it. And if you're dumb and obedient and stupid and have no dignity or self-value or self-love, if you don't give a shit about yourself, just go ahead and, listen to your marching orders. All right, every time you go complimenting Adolf Hitler's of the world, you're scapegoating Anne Frank once again. And I think Anne Frank's life is worth a million more times than all the Adolf Hitlers in the world. So that's why I can't find any, I don't respect a lot of genociders, a lot of slave-owning genocidal maniacs, a lot of murderers. It's hard to find something to respect about them. So, yeah. Black people didn't write any good books. Bullshit. Mortimer J. Adler has been a privileged white supremacist his entire fucking life, and he went ahead and put this criteria of the great books, acting like it was a neutral criteria, when it was actually very much weighted in favor of the classics that he had read when he was a kid. So I think this is just some childhood dream. He wants to make sure that all the professors when he was younger, that they're validated. And he's like, the classics, no black people were classic. No black person was classic. Black people are original people. So if anything, just the black person is a notable classic for the white race. Without the black man, there would be no white man. So, yeah. And I also like the idea how they're putting the movies and TV shows and songs, because, right, in a book, there's only so much information, so many ideas from the beginning to the end. And isn't that just like a movie? I've been able to read books. I've sometimes liked the movies and hated the books, liked the books, hated the movies. But ultimately, I felt like if I read the book or watched the movie, I had an idea of what the thing was about, whereas I didn't know beforehand. And I think this is what every generation needs to do anyways, decide what we think is good and what isn't good. He didn't like Cicero and Francis Bacon. And Cicero actually had a badass quote about power and freedom. But I'm not going to tell you unless you ask. So, yeah. And Don Quixote. Don Quixote was the only Latino book that got in there. Grapes of Wrath didn't get in there. Gone with the Wind didn't get in there. Uncle Tom's Cabin didn't get in there. I Have a Dream speech didn't get in there. No black people whatsoever, and most women were cut out. Most Latinos, no, yellow, brown, black, or red people. I guess Native Americans wouldn't have been in there either. Red, yellow, brown, black, or females. So, only white men know what the fuck they're talking about, huh? Yeah. I'm pretty sure absolute power corrupts absolutely, so if the government is telling you that something's true, don't believe them. If any authority figure comes out and they're like, hey, the suspect pulled out a gun and we had to shoot and kill him. Okay, done. And they'd be the newspaper man, wait, he pulled a gun out first? Oh, okay, well, done, open and shut case right there. They're all ignorant. They have no background, no depth of knowledge. He's so smart. No depth of knowledge, no memory. I wouldn't be so impatient if they're irrelevant. All this talk of quotas, so many blacks and whites and women and men. So ultimately, what does Mortimer J. Adler think about black people? He's like, there are good books by blacks, about 10 of them, that are worth reading for one or maybe two ideas. All the black people in the world, none of them matter, except for maybe 10 of their books, and it was only because of 1 or 2 faults. That's it. Black people just haven't wrote a great book. They don't know how. They haven't listened to Mortimer J. Adler, Mortimer Jerome Adler, and worshipped him and kissed his massa's ass and enslaved themselves to their white massa. Uncle Tom, Cabin. No wonder he doesn't want anybody to read that. He don't want anybody to read Uncle Tom's Cabin, Gone with the Wind, Gettysburg Address, Martin Luther King speeches, because those were great works by black people, which were popular, and he don't even want to put them in. Fuck this guy. Fuck Mortimer J. Adler. Fuck fake progressives, middle class, stuck up yuppie fucking snobs that look at a white supremacist and they're apologists. Fuck all white supremacist apologist motherfuckers out there. All right? Okay. I'm out. Peace.